welcome to beautiful Vienna, Austria's great capital and largest city. This year, Vital Options International took on its 6th year of the on-site coverage of the signature gathering, the essential ESMO ECCO Congress. The European Cancer Congress combined the efforts of the most important European oncology professionals with the aim of improving the prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and care of cancer patients.
How, for instance, do you take things off the list? When does a medicine cease to be essential in terms of the list itself?
It's not only a list of essential medicines for cancer treatment. It's essential medicines for conditions in general, HIV to malaria to everything. And we have standards for medicines to be eligible to be on the list. One is it need to be a public health relevance, a condition which is affecting many people. It needs to be an effective treatment available. The medicine needs to be tested in clinical trials to be effective, affordable, cost-effective, and these are the criteria. These are the key criteria. And based on these criteria, we, over the last 30 years of existence of the essential medicines list, there were many, many updates. And only recently an update about the chapter on essential medicine for adults and a chapter on essential medicines for children cancer. Both, it's important to mention all of this, are based on the, let's say, expert opinion. We have, WHO is a convener of experts. We are not the oncologist and the specific. We are convening these experts and then we produce the list based on this criteria. And the objective of this list is to catalyze changes in the countries due to our reputation as advising governments where to go. The framework of action, the 6 building blocks, and how to develop a national essential medicine list.
And so, how does it accept it? So, excuse me.
You want to ask me something?
Come
along.
Yes. So, considering the situation in Europe, that not 2 countries seem to be able to agree on a single health technology assessment system, let alone cost effectiveness, who is the person who decides for the WHO that something is, for example, cost effective?
We have clear criteria about this. We have consensus in the expert commission to put, and we have this experience very recently where we convened and there was no doubt about this inclusion of new medicines on the list, and the cost effectiveness is a key criteria to put it on the list.
Can we read this up somewhere?
Yes, it's on the WHO website. yeah.
It's a good question because in the UK you have NICE, which is constantly appraising drugs to see whether or not they're cost effective and so on. But how though? Fair enough about this. But what about when the newer drugs come along in this? I mean, some of the drugs which revolutionise the treatment of patients. When does essential sort of cease to be basic? And when we say essential is actually, it is so good, this drug, that every patient should have access to this kind of drug. In other words, not just that it is a good drug, but actually for the kind of treatment that we as patients and patient advocates expect, it's the best drug that you can have in as well. When do we have that switch? How do you decide that switch?
Take the example of trastuzumab, which is now part of the essential medicine list. There was a process. We had to struggle to put it on the list, it was a second step, now it's on it. Because it is such a revolutionary step forward for breast cancer treatment that the expert committee said, look, despite its high cost, it is not a question of cost, it's a question of science to put it on the list.
It's also important for advocates to differentiate what goes into the essential list and what is new. And what is new, despite everything that is presented, has to be confirmed. And just because one drug has an extraordinary result in one trial, that can be by chance. Clinical trial is not a perfect science.
We are having decisions made by our HTAs on 2 trials, or 1 trial sometimes. So it's no good saying we have to go through the process. We have to have 3 or 4 trials. We have drugs now that have been made, decisions have been made on because of 2 trials. So there's no standardization, and we need 15 trials before we can put it on the list. This is not acceptable for patients that die.
No, that's a different situation. So for you to be in an for a medicine to be in an essential list, you have to have a certain number of conditions, and Andreas has explained, namely the number of patients that will have an impact, and the wealth of data that confirms that impact is really important. So trastuzumab, it took us a lot of time, actually, and you can blame on the scientific community, because it took us more or less 10 years to actually understand the true impact of trastuzumab in advanced cancer, in advanced breast cancer. But it changed completely the natural history of the disease. It was once the one that killed more. It is now the one where patients live longer, okay? So sometimes I understand the urgency, but unfortunately we also had several rush decisions that then also have impact and led to some deaths. I'll give you an example in the area where I work. So high-dose chemotherapy was once a standard for breast cancer, a jump to rush standard because it was saving lives. And then in the end, after mature data, we realized that it was not saving lives, it was increasing mortality. So there has to be a balance between crying out for the new drug, but also waiting for having to be completely sure that this is going to be an essential medicine that will change the history of a cancer or a disease.
But was also to let it approve.
Microphone, please.
No, it's not nothing so important, but I think the fact that the drug was on the market and demonstrate that it's not efficient, also its approval actually. So I see it positive that the drug was there and demonstrated that it was not effective for the population in the real life. So it's not bad that was. So give us access early to the drugs, and you'll have the benefit of demonstrating that they are not effective in the real world.
Yeah, that's what you would call.
Can I ask a question, please? I'd quite like to bring it back to what was said by the WHO. My name is Yola Gorbooth. I'm the CEO of Europa Colon. We have the FDA, we have NICE, we have EMA, and now I hear we have the WHO making a list. I'm not in any way being negative about it, but I really can't understand why we need so many different organizations to make lists, because surely these lists must be contradictory. And we know already how difficult. Do you work together, the four of you? Do you all sit around the table and discuss, or do you all make different lists? How do we know now which drugs should be prescribed? This is a wonderful reason for governments to say, well, you can't agree, and so therefore we make this decision.
Yeah, quick answer. Thank you for this, and I fully understand your confusion. There's a fundamental difference between a WHO recommendation and a national authority, regulatory authority. We are providing recommendations in all matters of health. And the list is a recommendation to use a certain number of medicines for national approval. Right? Then after, it's a list which is global for every country in the world. We have to make standards which are satisfying all the needs of the countries, 189 member states. So then the countries take it up. We are not mandating the countries need to do things. We're not imposing them, but we're recommending because of our label and authority and expertise. Then that's the process. And then they take it up or not. We are not a military force enforcement, law enforcement. And then the national authorities will discuss with national in the national context, in the options they have nationally, to approve or not approve.